Let's okay. So the recording has started. I'm just going to do when I go live, I'm going to do a quick intro. All right. So see if I can get this done. I'm going to give a brief intro and then I'll like fix this later. Okay. We both have the sniffles. That's funny. I've had it the entire pandemic. Okay, we're going live.
Hey there.
It says it's setting it up. Okay, I think we're live. So thank you so much, Trevor, for rejoining Undercovered Magazine. So for our audience, my name's Jetta Beck. I'm the co-founder of Undercovered Magazine, which is an amateur political blog. I've described it before. And in 2018, I had the pleasure of interviewing Trevor Fitzgibbon. Trevor, can you give us a little bit of background on what your role was and what it is today? Because I think you're still in the same line of work, correct?
Yeah, first of all, nice to see you. Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it. But yeah, I've spent most of my life as a grassroots organizer and towards, I guess, the past 15, 20 years, doing kind of like guerrilla PR, so public relations, communications for various campaigns and causes that I believe in. And I'm still doing that today.
Wonderful. So I'm going to put this on speaker view too, so that we can center everybody. Now, you and I met when early in my volunteerism, early in my, because I was not active until January of 2017. And the very first campaign that I donated to was Arturo Carmona. And there was a smear campaign waged against him 6 days before his election.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about your experience with that particular story.
With Arturo or smear campaigns in general?
Well, you can both really.
Yeah, I recognized what was happening to Arturo. I've seen it time and time again, and it's there's a guy named Laird Wilcox out of Kansas, and he is a political scientist who coined the term ritual defamation campaign. And I know about it because I experienced it myself when I was falsely accused of some pretty severe allegations, and was later cleared of those allegations, and actually fought back and won legally, and got my accuser to publicly apologize and retract all of the allegations. But I remember when it was happening to me, when one day you're kind of, you've got your life and your home and your work. You've worked so hard to build a business, and I had with my firm Fitzgibbon Media, represented all of these organizations that I believed in, and groups and individuals, including WikiLeaks and Edward Snowden and Chelsea Manning, and a number of kind of, I guess, hot button clients. But you've got your life one minute, and then literally the next day, you're on the homepage of the Huffington Post and being accused of sexual assault and sexual harassment. And it feels like the earth is shifting beneath your feet, and you don't know what to do, why, but it just kind of takes off. And and I saw on Arturo it started to take off fairly significantly. For me, it took off to the extent that uh, there were paid bots that were somebody had bought bots to come after me. It was a whole orchestrated campaign, and we now have through discovery, we got all these documents, and it was all just a total planned orchestrated thing to take me down. And there's nothing you can do in the moment because you don't know what's happening, and you hire an attorney who tells you not to talk about it, and so you keep your mouth shut and you watch yourself being turned into a caricature in real time, and being compared to people like Harvey Weinstein in the New York Times. And it's pretty horrific, and your family ripped apart, and your children suffer the most, and you can't find work because of Google and people searching for your name. And so it's an intense thing. Now, with Arturo, he experienced some of that. I don't think it was as rigorous, and it certainly didn't last as long. I still have people who come after me fairly significantly today. I had one specific person who's an anon from Norway, who used to be part of LulzSec, and he was one of the pit bulls for the person who falsely accused me, and he tweeted out a photograph of me that was taken in 2015 of me standing outside of my home in Richmond, Virginia, before any allegation ever came against me. And he tweeted out this photo. You can see in the photo, I don't even realize I'm being photographed. And the photo was a surveillance photo. And he just wrote in the tweet, "Come on now, Trev, this can't go on much longer, can it?" And when you see that kind of stuff, it's. And by the way, the photo doesn't exist anywhere on the internet. And one of his colleagues was just, I don't know, made the mistake tweeting it out that it came from a drone. And so, when you're working and you're representing people like Julian Assange and Snowden, it's you got to remember back in that time, 2015, it's right around the DNC leaks, the WikiLeaks put out, and at that time, the WikiLeaks task force was bigger than the Al Qaeda task force. And I'm like nothing. I'm like a bit player where I just did PR, in the same way that I would represent MoveOn.org, one of my other clients, or Color of Change, or but just
that was actually something that I highlighted in the article too, is that every company does business with vendors, and just because you have vendors doesn't mean that they have whatever intelligence you're looking for at the top of the organization.
Right. Yeah, it's but anyway, it was brutal. I made it through. I certainly learned a lot. Really worked hard to try to make amends, and have certainly it's changed me significantly. And I understand the concept of power dynamics a lot more now. And when you are working with somebody, you work with them, they're not necessarily your friend. You're there to work, and that's it. And I think for years, I mean, on one hand, I get it. For years, women have just suffered and taken a lot of bullshit. So I fundamentally admire and value like the Me Too movement, for example. But I would also just say that anybody who doesn't think that any movement, including the Me Too movement, can't be weaponized to take somebody out, is pretty naive, you know?
Well, yes, and it presents a real challenge for actual victims. That if it is used frivolously and inappropriately, then it makes it harder for those of us who have actual claims of harassment or rape or whatever,
Right.
however far it goes. It makes
Right.
it hard for us to actually get anybody to listen to us because people are doubting whether or not we're we're telling the truth. And so there's situations like Arturo Carmona where the claims were for the audience who don't know what the claims were. The claims against him were that somebody who was a surrogate for the Bernie campaign had sexually harassed a volunteer or a staffer, I can't remember, who was within the campaign. And they brought they brought the complaint to Arturo, and they're saying that he didn't handle it properly. So they tanked his campaign because they basically accused him of being a bad manager. This has happened again and again locally, Trevor. That also happened against a candidate who was running for the California Democratic State Party chair position. Daraka Larimore Hall had almost identical claims against him. And like what you were saying is that they hired bots against you, but clearly you were a more important takedown than any of the local operations that I've seen happen. There's a lot less money being put into the local smear campaigns, and obviously they went big with you. So let's transition to that for a second too. Get to the interview that we did and talk about. You were not the only person accused that was connected to the WikiLeaks operation. There were several near identical accusations, correct?
There were pretty much anybody who's worked with them gets it's the same playbook. Um, uh, Jacob Applebaum, Julian, a couple of their attorneys, uh, the same, like identical allegations. So it would be funny if it didn't come at such a cost or expense, you know. But yeah, I mean that was a while ago, and I'm just really excited about the work I get to do now, you know, and all the great people I get to work with, and you know, I'm working with this great group called Unity Against COVID and Artists United Against COVID, um, and some renowned doctors that are COVID treating doctors that are working not only, you know, there's the vaccines and that's great, but there's also early treatment and a lot of people who uh, have symptoms of COVID um, and go to the hospital and they're turned away without any treatment. And, you know, it's just kind of unconscionable to think of the tens of thousands or the hundreds of thousands that died because of a lack of early treatment. And that, for instance, that almost happened to me before Christmas. I almost died. You know, I was turned away from Duke Hospital, the emergency room, after being diagnosed with severe COVID and pneumonia. But luckily, I had an advocate call the head of the hospital and got me back in there. And I was in the ICU for 8 nights, and they gave me the early treatment that I needed. And now I'm out there with new work and a new role to try to help save lives for people who haven't taken the vaccine or can't take the vaccine.
That's so fantastic. I'm glad that you shared that with us. So what you're saying is that there were, or maybe you want to expand on this topic, is that there are early treatments that at least the Trump administration did not invest in, and potentially Biden's administration hasn't either, that should have been widely available, correct?
Oh yeah, and let me be crystal clear. I mean, it's far. I mean, it's far worse than that. I mean, I would say that the information operation that we were up against in 2008 regarding the false Russian hacking narrative, worked with the organization, and Russia wasn't, the source unless somebody proves me otherwise. But that, the rise of organizations like the Atlantic Council and Propernaut and a lot of these outfits that are funded billions of dollars to deplatform people on the left and the right who are not with the information operation, the narrative. And around then it was Russia, 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 right? And if you didn't go along with that, you'd be crushed by the information operation. You'd be taken out. This information operation happening as we speak right now, the blacklisting of, ivermectin and these early treatment protocols that they work. We've always used them in the United States. They're legal. They're FDA approved. They're made by the same companies that are making the vaccines, right? But they had to be blacklisted in order for the vaccines to get the emergency fast track authorization. Normally takes at least 2 years for a vaccine to be created and tested before the government feels that this is safe enough to give to the people, to put out there. We went from 2 years to 2 months. They waived that. So they were putting out vaccines without the normal required testing they used to. And so they just kind of waived a lot of this stuff. And had they been talking about early treatment as a viable alternative, they likely would not have received that fast track. And, I mean, for me, it's hard because it's like I've been vaccinated my whole life, and I'm totally pro-vaccine. And all the doctors, the people that I work with are pro-vaccine as well. But you can be pro-vaccine and still be very critical of what's been happening now. I mean, the last COVID death, or the last vaccine-related deaths we've ever had, was the swine flu. And there were 26 vaccine-related deaths around the swine flu vaccine. And we pulled it. It was pulled from shelves immediately after 26 deaths. In the US alone, you've had at least 4,000 vaccine-related deaths from these current vaccines, but no one's going to talk about it. So it's pretty amazing to see what's happening right now. And there's such a weird, sick push for the vaccine and for the vaccine passports, which is like globally, which is in essence, it's a global identification card. And that's what the vaccine passport is. And it's just really odd. And it's odd to see, I'm as left as they come, right? I'm pro-vaccine and I am very leftist, but any falling out of line with getting that vaccine and you are crucified in social media.
There was a whole thing about the real IDs too, that the whole reason that we were transitioning the identification cards was for tracking. So I mean, there might be something to that. There's a whole counter problem with that as well. I live in a Republican county, and my board of supervisors refuses to actually give us the uh, whatever passport is called, or what the vaccine passport, because traveling, oftentimes you might need to prove that you've been vaccinated for like polio or something if you're going to another country. Our county is so anti-vax that they refuse to issue the needed documentation for people to travel to places like Australia.
Wow. Yeah, it's incredible, just seeing everything going on right now. I definitely think that it's been interesting to see like how this all relates to the role of public relations and journalism in general. Um, I think Trump, I mean, he alienated so many people. He pissed so many journalists off. And it all started, it wasn't like just like the rhetoric, right? I mean, I remember that South Carolina debate in the primary, the Republican debate, hearing him just trash and go after Bush, just go after him, and accusing his brother of starting a needless war in Iraq and costing so many lives and taxpayer dollars. Donald Trump sounded like a MoveOn.org ad. If you remember those ads that we used to run, Move On, I mean, he was just going after Bush, and he won that primary. Like Trump, I mean, that was Bush country, and Trump kicked his ass. And when I see just kind of the level of media not really knowing how to handle that kind of thing, or not having a president who is the first president to be tweeting as often as he was. I mean, if you remember, like when he got in there and he starts tweeting all the time, I would get like alert after alert after alert from Politico, where they would send out political alerts based on his tweets, because they didn't know how to handle it. So you get like 20 alerts in a day from Politico, and they're all based around his tweets. And just kind of like, in a lot of ways, it reminds me of Hugo Chavez. Chavez, when he was elected in Venezuela, very populist ticket and a big ego, and came in and broke up the entire system. Broke up how the families controlled all of the wealth and the oil, and it pissed everybody off. Nobody knew what to do. The media turned on him, right? And I feel the same thing happened to Trump. So it wasn't just the rhetoric, it's the fact that he upset the entire establishment and the way the game is always played in DC. And in some of his policies were just deplorable, no pun intended, but just god awful as well. And so I think that just flipped everybody out. And but I think as a result of that, you have a lot of like the art of and the profession of journalism and the integrity of journalism and the standards went belly up. I mean, they were just kind of thrown out the window. And I mean, I think the majority of the mainstream media, of course, wanted to see Trump lose, right? And they were happy, and they wouldn't publish stories critical of Hunter Biden, right? They wouldn't even launch investigatory stories about Hunter Biden and his laptop and what was in it and all of that stuff. And is there like tons of evidence there? Absolutely. At least open an investigation. But they wouldn't do it because they didn't want to print anything that would hurt Biden in the general election. So I've never seen that, in my lifetime, an entire media kind of turn on a president. But man, it happened. It was wild to see. But then with journalists, it's like, where do you go from here?
We have seen it though. We have seen that before. I mean, first of all, I'm no fan of Trump. And I think that a lot of the criticism against him is absolutely founded. But we have seen that happen before because we saw the entire media turn against Bernie. And part of the reason
Well, there you go. Yeah.
part of the reason that the Trump was able to advance was because he was taking a lot of talking points from Bernie. That's why he sounded like move on.
I know he had a very similar campaign, right? They were both so populous, and I would have loved to have seen that election in general. You know.
Yeah, had Bernie advanced, that would have been very interesting. So I know that, okay, so you're not feeling well, so we're going to actually do this the two-parter. But before you go, can you refresh my memory, because you and I have been talking for years. There was you mentioned earlier that you used to live in Richmond, Virginia, and I did too. I actually lived there back in like 2006 through 2009. You used to do some really interesting, before you were like doing the WikiLeaks and the Chelsea Manning and all that, you had some really interesting activism work that you were doing. And I can you refresh my memory on that?
Environmental work?
Maybe, I can't remember if it was like, if it was environmental, like, or if it was like justice, social justice, but there was something really cool that you were doing.
I'm just, we've always like worked with a lot of artists and musicians to get them involved in our campaigns. So I don't know if that was part of it, but yeah, I mean, that's the thing, man. It's like, I feel so lucky to have been able to work on all those issues I believe in. And, I, you know, I never left, my principles and how I believed in that and how I still do. And I miss it so much. But I mean, campaign after campaign after campaign, it was so great. We worked on prison reform and mass incarceration and whistleblower work and the war in Iraq. And I feel so lucky to have been able to work with David Fenton, who was one of my mentors. And I came up to DC in 2002 to push back against the run up to the war in Iraq. And I lived in a little basement apartment and worked. I mean, it's crazy how much we worked. But because I was in a position to have these great clients doing these revolutionary things like Move On was, or these soldiers, the appeal to redress, these active duty military officers, U.S. military officers and infantry soldiers who were serving in Iraq, and they came home on break and out of their clothes, they got them on 60 Minutes, and they risked their entire careers to call for withdrawal of troops from Iraq. And Lara Logan, the wonderful journalist who was with 60 Minutes, she did that piece. So I mean, I don't remember exactly what it was, but there's just a lot of great people and campaigns that I used to be able to focus on. And now it's a bit different, but I also saw, I've learned a lot, like, it's not always black and white, and that's the way you think it is. I've learned how, you cannot, you can't campaign and be in integrity if you're willing to do dishonest stuff. And I remember a quote from on the MeToo movement. It was on false rape allegations, and there's a quote from a woman. I think she was like the editor of Vogue or Teen Vogue or something. She said, if a handful of men are falsely accused and their lives are destroyed, I don't really have much sympathy for them when I think of all of the millions of women whose lives have been destroyed but never came forward. And it's hard to argue with, the proportion, it's so disproportionate, and she's right, of course, but like, I think that the only way you can win a campaign, whether it is for the environment, you know, uh, saving national forests when we blockade logging roads, or, uh, you know, uh, immigration, and trying to help the dreamers. When you compromise your integrity in order to benefit a movement, it's not going to work out well, and it'll always catch up to you.
Well, it's deflection. It's a straw man argument because every man who is falsely accused uh, more than likely has a family that is also impacted. And, yeah, we have an epidemic of, a culture that attacks women. We're still fighting the glass ceiling. We still get paid less. We still get thrown around like rag dolls in regards to like sexual harassment and stuff. But it doesn't mean that it's okay to throw away false allegations and let innocent men get have their lives ruined. That's not okay.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's like, uh, when the staff voted to close the firm, in my situation, I was hit with these allegations in a 48-hour period, and was told that they were going to go to the press unless I just left. And I said, I can't. I'm not going to. I created this, and I didn't even know I didn't know anything about it, right? The accusers or anything, and they voted to close it, and then shortly thereafter, it was divided into 6 different firms. Mine was, and with the clients were pretty much equally distributed out, which is very unusual. That's unnatural. Ordinarily, the firm continues to go. Maybe a couple of people leave, but so that was really unusual. And but it's just been really wild to see. I think at the time, I think that there is a lack of, by kind of the younger generation, there's a lack of appreciation for how hard and how long it takes to build something and how easy it is to blow it up. And so when my firm went down and then 6 more were recreated, I think maybe like half of them are still around. The rest didn't make it.
Wow. Okay, so let's do this. Let's continue this conversation tomorrow night. I'll
Yeah.
wrap us up on Facebook right now, but don't jump off yet because I
And,
want to.
and I wish I could be on Facebook, but they kicked me off. I was deplatformed because I was tweeting out. I was putting too much stuff out in support of Assange during the extradition hearing that's going on in England right now. So unfortunately, I'm not even going to be able to see it on Facebook.
Well, that's okay because this is on a page. This is on a page, so you can go incognito mode. Plus, I will be downloading the recording and putting it on YouTube.
Awesome.
So let me just, I will thank you, Facebook audience. We're going to conclude here, and we will be back at the same time, same place tomorrow night. Okay. Let me also end the recording. Stop recording. Okay.